So now we're going to begin the book Contagious. I like this book. I personally think it's better than a textbook in the respect that it looks at how information travels, and I think that greatly impacts how we buy, and hopefully you'll enjoy this particular book as much as I do. The first major story that you come to in this book is the one about the $100 cheesesteak, and it starts about a company, a gentleman who was looking to open a restaurant in Philadelphia, and he had great food, very high-end food, but he was looking to separate himself from the crowd and allow himself his restaurant to stand out. And so, since he was in Philly, he thought the $100 cheesesteak would be a great way to do that. And that is great, but still you have to get that information to pass along, right? You could have a $100 cheesesteak on your menu, but if you don't get people to know you have it, then that isn't going to accomplish anything. So how did that happen? How did that information pass along? Well, it's like anything else. Somebody came to the restaurant, they saw the $100 cheesesteak, the people in the restaurant explained it, one thing leads to another, and it becomes a word-of-mouth issue. But why did they choose to pass that particular story along? What is it about a $100 cheesesteak that forced people to, or made people feel like they wanted to pass it along? As you read the book, I want you to focus on or concentrate on what the underlying behavior is, because one of the things he talks about in the introduction is that viral videos or some of the examples he gives, they're not necessarily the best priced. There might not even be a price associated with it. It could not necessarily be the best product or the best video, or it might not be something really spectacular that differentiates it from other things, and there might not even be advertising money that's spent on it. So how does something go viral? If you take, for example, his example of the name, right? How did the name Olivia over, say, Rosalie or any of these other names become so popular? It's not a better price than other names. It's certainly not a better product than other names. And there wasn't an advertising campaign that was out there saying, name your child Olivia. So how did that happen? What was that underlying behavior? Because candidly, guys, it's a behavior that drives that. And why does one video become more popular than another? Why did the Ice Bucket Challenge take off? Why did that happen? And that's what the chapters that you're going to be looking at take into consideration. So it isn't necessarily what gets money spent on it. It isn't necessarily the best price or the best product, although none of those things hurt, and they certainly can add to something going viral. So we certainly know that word of mouth has a huge value to businesses. It's a $200 average increase in sales in a restaurant when word of mouth is added, and if that's the only change. So there's been a lot of research done, and it shows that the average restaurant will gain an extra $200 if people pass it along through word of mouth. And we know from Amazon's great analytics on their back end that a book that has a 5-star rating versus a book that has a 1-star rating has a 20-to-1 sales ratio. That's huge. That's 19 extra books out of 20 that you're going to sell if it has good word of mouth. And word of mouth, or WOM as it sometimes is called, is much more targeted. It's much more targeted because you're targeting the conversation to whatever interest you have and whatever the person on the other side has. And I was recently traveling when I was traveling out of Logan, and I had to take a bus to get back to New Hampshire, and I had taken this specific bus. It's called the Logan Express. And I was standing there chit-chatting with somebody, and she said that she was taking, like this regular Peter Pan bus. And I said, well, why don't you take the Logan Express? And she said, well, I didn't know about the Logan Express. And I said, well, you go in here, and you go down there, and you pick up a ticket, and it's $12, and it drops you right here. And I said, and you don't have to wait 3 hours to get the bus. You can take one every hour. And I was thinking about that as I was chit-chatting with this girl, and I was thinking, I just became a salesperson for that company. I passed along information regarding Logan Express on behalf of Logan Express, and they had no clue I was doing it. So word of mouth is very powerful. In the book, it looks at why do you pass that? Why did I do that? Why did I share that information with that woman, and what did I get out of it? So one of the very interesting facts that he provides in the book is that he talks about, well, where does this chatter happen? similar to the chatter that happened between me and the woman in the previous slide, where I talked about, how I thought she should take this other bus because it was a better solution for her. So where does that chatter happen? Well, when this question is asked, most people say it happens online. It happens in Twitter and social media and Facebook. And the answer to that is not accurate. Only about 7% of it actually happens online. The remaining 93% does not. And that's because, yes, we do spend a couple of hours a day usually in social platforms, but we spend an awful lot more of our time outside of social platforms. So where does it take place? Well, it takes place like it did for me, on the sidewalk, in the classroom, in the hallway, it used to be called the water fountain conversation. But basically, it takes place everywhere in life. You share something with someone in your family. You tell somebody a good deal that you've heard about. And there are reasons why you do it, and there are reasons why people take it in. And the little video that you're going to see at the bottom of this is about part of the reason why we share, which is gossip. And the word gossip has a kind of negative connotation to it, but gossip actually has a foundation in our history. So I want you to at least watch the video and get a little understanding of why sometimes we share things. I also think we share things because it says something about us. I knew that before you knew that. I know something you don't know. And that's definitely part of a behavior. It's part of our self-image and part of how we think about ourselves, and a little bit of pack order, as you'll see as we go through the semester. So chatter happens online, yes, but it happens elsewhere as well. And if you're a marketer, you need to understand where that chatter is happening so that you can influence it. But more importantly, you need to know who's doing the chattering. Because once you can figure that out, if you get to the right person, you can drive the right results. And in the book, he asks a very important question. Is it 1 in 10 people who are driving the other 9 to make decisions and buy? I think you have to think about that. Is it 1 person in 10 who's recommending to other people what they should do? Interesting question. So the book chapters center around these 6 principles. The first of them is social transmission. Do we share because that's part of who we are? We're social beings. And in this book, you really see the 3, what I consider to be the 3 hallmarks of human existence. And the first is that we are social beings. The second is that we're sensory beings, right? We smell things, look at things, we touch things. And the third is that we're emotional beings. And emotional in the term that we have emotions, not necessarily that we're emotional like we're emotional basket cases. So in the book, he looks at first the social part. Is it something about us being social beings that has us passing things along? The second is a chapter on triggers, which is very interesting. The third is, you got to get an emotion behind things in order for people to pass it along. And then public, because we want to be seen as being able to pass along good information. Practical information is the 5th chapter, does very well, and somehow you have to relate it to a story because stories stick, and we think better when we think in terms of stories because we've been thinking in stories since our youth. So these are the 6 foundational chapters of the book, and I think every one of them has something of value to add to the conversation. One of the final stories that he shares in the introduction section is about the book company that shared 2 books with every professor that they sent their book to. So instead of sending out a book, for a professor to analyze and decide if they want to use it in their class, they sent 2, and they said, please feel free to share one with a colleague. And I think that's a really smart marketing approach to use to get word of mouth and sharing and that social aspect of our personalities involved. And this is the type of marketing, this is the type of things that a marketer can do to take advantage of the behavior that we naturally have ingrained in us. Most professors would not keep both books. What they would do is they would pass one along to a colleague or a friend. And when you consider that the marketing that they would have to do in order to find that second professor and get them interested, and how much better it is to have a professor come to you and say, hey, I read this book, it's great, I thought you might want a copy of it. So much more powerful, such a good way to take advantage of the behavior. So that's really what I want you to take out of this book. I want you to see those marketing approaches that people take that sort of play into the behaviors that he talks about in the book. So I leave you with the final thought that he mentions that 1 in 10 Americans tell the other 9 how to vote, where to eat, and what to buy. and that if you can, as a marketer, find that one person that dictates and drives the other 9, then you can save yourself an awful lot of marketing, because you can market to that one, and through social transmission and their willingness and want to share, you'll get to the other 9. Do you think that's accurate? Somewhere in the next couple of weeks, some of these questions are going to be asked in the discussion post, so you can start thinking about them now, and you can decide, are you driven by the behavior of others, or are you the person driving the behavior, or do you feel like you're not driven by the behavior of others at all? Welcome to Contagious.